Right, when I said initial squad, I'm doing it now. The initial squad assessment, I mean, obviously our current squad assessment, as though it was an initial squad assessment. So that's what we're doing in this video. We're going to go through all of our players. And our senior squad. And we'll see how the time is going, and then maybe we'll do the youth as well. So let's reassess. So our keeper. So high shot stopping, which is good. High enough parrying. Not very good handling. High enough agility. In combination, we're talking about these three. It's possible, but it's not great. This is key. So this keeper is not necessarily as great as what we were thinking he is. The shot stopping is pretty high though, so that's good. But anyway, I'm just saying it's not. It is going to be possible, I think, to find a better keeper for our team that has way less total attribute points, but is better for our team, and has way lower wages, and is way younger, and potentially way cheaper. Now, really difficult, mind you, but I think it's possible. So, because I don't think this parrying, handling, and agility, like that's, you know, in the realms of completely average, completely normal, let's say. Maybe a little bit above average, but at least in regards to keepers that we'd ever consider, it's basically average. Shot stopping is good, but again, it's not world class. It's not in the 80s. It's just, you know, it's just above average or quite a bit above average, but it's in that realms. It's not like totally crazy. And then in regards to all the other stuff, he's got good durability, but that's probably one of the few things that really doesn't matter for us, because that's more about him having to make loads and loads and loads of saves and not losing a lot of condition. But our keeper doesn't really need to make that many saves. He's only tasked to generally make 2 or 3 saves a game. What we need is for him to save those. We don't need him to not lose a lot of condition because he's, you know, saving a bit. So that for us doesn't matter at all. And yeah, the speed's pretty good. We care a bit about that. Not as much as probably all these other attributes, but yeah, it's fine. It's good and it's useful to be higher. We're happy with that. In regards to contested stuff, the organisation and command of area, this is for helping with set pieces or whatever. Like, yeah, it's alright. But again, it's like, that's it, it's alright. It's not like you're saying, like, we're going to be super at defending set pieces because of this keeper. All we're saying he's not a liability, really. He's not. So it's just in the middle. It's certainly something that you could get more of. And then basically a lot of this other stuff, whatever it is, right? It's all just pretty low generally. The only real exception to that, like there's a couple. So I guess the rushing out, I mean, fine. These other ones, I guess you're happy for everything to generally be higher, but it's like, for us, not that big a deal. And the aerial ability's high, fine, that's okay, whatever. We're not too bothered about that one being high versus other stuff, on the whole. So, I think on the whole, it's like, he's fine, he's good, but it's not like, he's not that good. He's not 700k wages good, he's not having paid £1.6 million good, especially considering he's 28. Basically, this was a mistake. We already highlighted this was a mistake just because of the high wages, but I think it's also just a mistake because he's not actually good enough to justify the wages and the price tag. But it's a learning process as well. That's the thing. Like, I think we only really know that because we look through loads and loads of scouting pools now, and just sort of can compare this to other keepers that we could have signed at various points. So, so that's a little bit of an excuse, but I'd say it's still the case that I think we were thinking a little bit more in terms of I think we just sort of thought that this type of keeper is a bit rarer than what it is, I think. And he is pretty good. He is pretty well rounded. Again, I'm just saying, like, at least because we've changed over time basically. So we are saying that our just for this type of wages, we're really gunning for closer to 250, and this is just way over basically. So anyway, So basically, keeper not that great for what he's on and stuff. This central defender, I think Wage is fine. He is fast. He's good in the air. Marking is not that great, but it's not totally bad. Tackling is not great. Composure is okay, so at least that's going to help him give away less penalties. That kind of becomes more important to some degree the worse the tackling is, because the worse the tackling is when they're attempting tackles in the box, the more likely they are to foul or give away a penalty or whatever, and the composure helps a bit with that. So positioning horrible. So, and then the passing vision horrible. You don't really want him getting the ball a lot. So he's pretty limited, but again, you know, I think he does some specific things well. He's alright. Happy. On the balance, fine. This guy costs way more, but for now we're basically just assessing keeping him, I guess, not necessarily whether the purchase price made sense to begin with. Wage is fine. Speed, really good. Aerial ability, really good. Positioning, bad again. Passing and vision, bad again. So again, just not playing the ball or whatever. Tackling, good. Marking, okay. Very similar to the other guy, to be honest. He's just almost like a better version of the other guy. It's like all the same strengths and all the same weaknesses, pretty much. Composure way lower though, so that's a big difference, you know, somewhat. And yeah, at the end of the day, like, we're just keeping him because these are just, yeah. Then this guy, tackling again, he is younger. Passing and vision much better, so we're happy for this guy to actually play the ball more than the other two guys, and that's something that I wasn't aware of. Not now, anyway. I might have realised it at some point and maybe mentioned it in a previous video, but it's not something I'm consciously thinking now in the matches I'm playing, that the other two central defenders, we really don't want playing the ball at all, and this one, we're kind of totally happy for him to play the ball, and I think that's just not something that I was aware of tactically, so we'll keep that in mind. That aside, you know, again, the marking not that great. He's not fast either. He's not particularly good in the air. You know, he's basically not really that good at all. But, you know, he is only 19. So, you know, I think this is definitely the case that this guy needs to be viewed through we need to view this guy through the lens of he should not be in the starting. He should not be one of the top first three centre-halves for our first team. We're already aware of that, so we have been keeping an eye out for another DC. He's probably okay to be the fourth choice, at least for next season. And then after that, if we were in a high division, he wouldn't be good enough for that either. He'd need to be more like fifth choice. But a fifth choice from the lens of that we are playing three, so really fifth choice is closer to third and a half choice or something like that in a regular tactic. When you're only playing two DCs. Because one, you know, obviously, if you've got three DCs... in theory, like, fourth choice is equivalent to third choice if you have three, and fifth choice is equivalent to fourth choice, but not quite, because you also have more chance of getting injuries and suspensions and whatnot for the three that you have, because you're playing more. So, and the endurance is super low. So this guy really should be, like, always on the bench, pretty much. And if he is, then he's likely to be coming on later in the matches. Their forwards and stuff are likely to be more tired. They're likely to be a bit slower. He's likely to not be as exposed as much by this lower speed, but yeah, so the takeaways here mostly is that we just should be looking to get another DC, perhaps quite, like, we need them for next season. We don't need them urgently now, because it all doesn't matter, but next season, really, hopefully, you know, we do need one more better than him. And the other takeaway is that he can pass the ball, and we have not factored that in. And DMC, thing is, we want him to be in this tactic. We were thinking that none of the defenders could play the ball, but one of them can. So that might change things a bit. But ignoring that, this guy is a deep line playmaker. At the end of the day, we want him to be able to play. He plays the ball quite a lot. We want him to be able to play the ball, and we want him to be able to do really good long range passes. Ideally, you know, as and when, say long range, but just range, maybe not all the way to the striker, but just passes that aren't to players right next to him, players that are just farther away, farther upfield. We want him to advance the ball upwards, where good opportunities exist, And he's going to need, in order to do that consistently, he's going to need the vision to spot them out, to spot out these opportunities. And he's going to need the passing to pull them off. So, as a deep line playmaker, he absolutely just needs high vision. I mean, the passing is okay, it's good enough, but that's really low. Like, we ideally want both of these to be mid-70s minimum. And then outside of that, we kind of just need tackling to be enough. So, to be honest, if this exact guy, but with like, well, if it was just like 78 passing, 78 vision, he'd kind of be awesome for what we need. But it's not. And I think there's definitely scope that we can get better passing and vision. And, you know, I think it's not unreasonable for us to find that. Like, it's in the realms of possibility that we could get mid to high 70s in passing and vision if we're willing to settle for mid 60s tackling and nothing else of any note, basically, that really matters. So, because if you look across these guys, his other higher stuff is like finishing, don't matter at all, crossing, don't matter at all. You know, determination, whatever, it helps with the development a bit or whatever. You know, and the speed is 66 or that's fine, so that's not insignificant. The work rate doesn't particularly matter. He's just sitting in one spot doing nothing, doesn't really matter. So, like, on the whole, and the agility is high and fine, we're happy to have it, but at the end of the day, like, there's a whole bunch of other attributes I'd rather be higher. So, and the aerial ability isn't particularly, it's low as well. The strength isn't particularly, like, a lot of stuff is okay, but he's not, and again, stuff that matters more, the positioning is good, sorry, and that does matter. But again, the marking is bad, so he's not that great. Basically, we can improve on this guy, and we need to be looking to do so, because ideally, these wages are just too high for a player that is basically just not as good as we want. So that's another one we need to actively be looking to replace. This guy, he's basically now backup, up and back winger to defend and attack. And from the lens of that, I would say the wages are fine. The 250k, age is fine. He's not helping on set pieces. Noted, it's not particularly great. A lot of the mentals are, they're all just low. Most of the technicals are low, save the crossing and dribbling, which do matter a lot, and the passing, which matters a lot. So he has got the right 3 technicals. Well, the 4th one that you'd ideally want is tackling to be much higher, like in the 60s ideally. So I'd say through that lens, like, this guy's probably fine, really. And the only real problem with him is just the tackling is too low. If that was just like 64 or whatever, it would probably be happy to have this guy as a long-term backup, or if they say third choice from the lens of there's 2 wing slots and he's the third choice winger. And we have bought the replacement on that basis, because we already realised that we weren't happy for him to be like in the first 2. Basically, he needed to be, and he wasn't good enough to be in the first 2 for what we'd want long term. So I think that's okay. I think we've assessed this guy properly. He's good enough to hang around for as long as we need him as a third choice or backup winger. Not good enough to start, fine for a backup, and we should be eventually be able to replace him. I think finding an actual player that's better than this guy, not going to be that difficult, but the issue is just that not a priority for us to replace backups at this point. We've got plenty of starters that we need to be looking to replace, so it's more of a cash prioritization issue. So this guy could be around for a while, and we're okay with it. It's got a limitation on the tackling. Would deal with it. This guy, straight away, just too old. I don't know. Like, this is I think the day that led the realization of buying this guy is what led to this whole realization that everybody just needs to generally be younger, and it also generally means they're less rounded, which also generally means lower wages. So again, same problem. Wages too high. Quite frankly, this is one of those guys that probably for us, like, it probably doesn't make sense to hang around waiting forever to get a transfer bid, because even when you do, like, whoopie-doo, it's going to be 50k more or something, when, we're paying potentially that much wages in a few days for him. So I think with this guy in particular, it really is just, we definitely be thinking in terms of we need the replacement, and we just get the replacement. As soon as we get the replacement, we can sell him in the same day. I don't think we need to wait for the bid. If we do get the bid, maybe we just sell him to get the extra money. But for now, for this guy in particular, we do need to be thinking in terms of we need to be actively looking for this guy to just whoever's going to play this role to just clear this guy off the books, because it just doesn't make sense. He doesn't fit with timelines. His wages are too high. He's only going to get worse. Any kind of value increase that we potentially going to get is going to be so insignificant compared to the wages and whatever else. It really doesn't matter. It just doesn't make any sense. And at the end of the day, the guy he's all right for what we need for the box to box or whatever, but he's just not. And he's playing good or whatever. He's fine. He's a good player, but it doesn't make any sense. And I think we should be able to find a player that's like in the ballpark of this good, maybe a bit worse. But it should be possible to get a player that's like, you know, in the ballpark of this guy, who's like 23 or something. So we need to be keeping an eye out for that. That's a priority. Almost a bigger priority than these other players, because this guy in particular is just not that great, and he's old and he's high wages basically. So, and I think one of the reasons why we did get him though is because he did have the passing tackling vision for the box-to-box role that we needed, and he did have enough speed and enough work rate and enough natural fitness and blah blah blah, and he had high enough aerial ability to help us with set piece, and that was a real issue when we got him. But since we've got him, I think like every player we've bought after him has also like had actual much in the 80s type of aerial ability. It's just something that has been a tipping point for every player we've purchased, knowing that we need to improve the aerial ability. So when we got this guy, improving the aerial ability was like really important, but now it kind of doesn't matter that much. It's not really important anymore. So I think we need to be aware of that. This guy, we bought him recently. He's much younger, much lower wages, so that stuff fits really well. He's quite fast, not that big a deal, but he's got good aerial ability, again, what we were talking about. The work rate is low, but the speed helps compensate for that. The endurance and natural fitness is high enough for the speed and the work rate, so that's all fine. I think the physicals are just generally fine, pretty good on the whole. Vision a bit low, not ideal. Passing is okay, tackling a bit low, long shots is fine, but the finishing composure is super low. So basically, like, he's probably not as good as the other guy that's older. On the whole, like, yeah, he's a bit faster or whatever, but it's like a bit better in the air, but there's no way that is better than all of this other stuff. I think part of the key is maybe trying to ensure that he's always in a role where the long shots could, be a thing. We don't ever want him in a role where he's never forwards enough to take long shots, especially because if he's in that role, then he's probably tackling quite a bit, and it's not. We need him in a role where he does get to attack. He can come back and defend, but he definitely needs to be in a role where he is involved and ideally takes some long shots, and ideally has some sort of space for himself up there, and ideally doesn't have space in front of him to try to hold him up from running in the box, because we don't want him from the finishing and the composure, because he's horrible. So I guess what I'm saying is he's running up here, but actually ideally what we want is him running up this side, because if he's running up this side, he's more likely to not keep surging forwards, because there's more likely to be another player in front of him taking that space up, and he's more likely to wait outside the box, and more likely to take a long shot. So we should be doing that. And it does mean when we hold him up here, this guy ends up tracking back and helping out with the trap here or whatever, makes a tackle, and he's worse at tackling than this guy, which is why we had him the other way. But I think on the whole, it's better to leverage this guy's strength and to nullify his shooting weakness than it is. We will have this stronger wide player here, forwards with the better tackling, so I think that'll balance out. And then this side, we'll reassess the whole thing when, in regards to this guy or whatever, when we get the replacement. It's not worth focusing too much for now, because we're planning to replace him. So for now, we'll just focus on trying to get the most out of this guy, and this guy will just take whatever's left. When we get the replacement, we'll worry about trying to get the most out of both of them. The right midfielder, that low finishing composure has certainly been an issue. He has had quite a few chances. He's typically shooting from a bit of a more difficult angle. I have noticed since we've done this change, he is getting a chance to drift in a bit more and end up shooting from a better angle a bit. So that's helped. Strength pretty good. Dribbling pretty good. Speed fast. Air ability good. Again, all the players we just bought it just end up high air ability. We never typically have to sub him off because of that high endurance. The long shots is actually good, but there's not a lot which I totally forgot about, to be honest. One thing that we could potentially do, if we put him to an inverted winger, then he may end up having some long shots. That's just, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's going to totally change so many things in the tactic to do that, but it isn't something that we just totally forgot that he had the long shots. I almost feel like I'm going to have to watch this video back myself after, and I'm going to write down all these notes down because it's the list is getting too big now for me to even remember just about. So we could at least in the being aware that in matches could be an option, to change it to have him cut in or whatever to have a long shot. So that's something to be aware of. We already remember the passing was low. We knew the finishing composure was low, and the crossing ain't that great, to be honest. So unfortunately the passing is pretty bad. But yeah, like the fact that the crossing isn't necessarily that great, like maybe it's not that bad for him to invert. It changes a lot though, to be honest, and we've already got loads of players in the center. It's like a totally different tactic almost. But anyway, it could be worth being aware of, especially in an injury crisis, especially just during a match when if we need to make subs and we only have certain type of players on the bench. It's just something we forgot. Right. This guy, we already talked about him a lot because we assessed him in the strikers. So I'll be quick. Like, basically, the finishing and the composure is just really, like, in particular, this role, creative forward, it's like, he just gets the ball so much. Because it's like a part of this is like, if there was he won't, but when his team has it, he looks to find space and demands that he's given him. Basically, he's demanding to his teammates to give him the ball. So he just gets the ball a lot more. And it just means that a lot funnels through him. And what he does is just super important. And this guy, he just isn't really good enough for a role of that magnitude or that stature. Like, he gets a lot of shots every game, and he's got 57 finishing and 36 composure. Long shots is okay, but loads of the shots he takes are from inside the box. He's dribbling with the ball a lot, and yeah, whilst the 67 dribbling is okay, the 73 speed, I've talked about this, is not an issue. That's fast enough for this player. It would not be a priority for us versus a load of these other attributes. We wouldn't want him to be slow, but 73 is fine. And the 27 strength is super low to sort of beat, because what you really want is him dribbling or whatever with the ball. And sometimes if he can just not get tackled, if somebody attempts a tackle and he beats it, like where he is with the ball, like it's just a golden chance is likely to result from that every time. So the ability to beat tackles for him in particular is just huge, basically. So basically, we just want someone that has... And then again, he's getting the ball a lot, and a lot of players funneling, and he's passing through and back and whatever. And the passing and vision just... It's okay or whatever, but it just... You want basically something like... Ideally, for example, if you're talking this same player, with all these other attributes the same, I'll quickly go through and say what ideally would be different here. So the crossing, I guess ideally that would be lower, to help other things be high, but that doesn't matter basically. We don't care about that high attribute. We would ideally want the dribbling to be more like 80. We want the finishing to be more like 80. We would want the long shots to be more like 80. We would want the passing to be more like 80. We'd want the composure to be more like 80. We would want the flair to be more like 80. We would want the vision to be more like 80. And we would want the strength to be, more like 80. Now, you could swap out all those 80s with 75s or 70s or whatever, but that's what we're talking about. We just want all of those attributes to be super high. And ideally some other stuff, like ideally the movement would maybe be high, and ideally, sure, the aerial ability high, why not? And ideally a whole bunch of other things, just, if it's on offer, just give them to me, they'd be high. But, in particular, why are we saying all of that? It's just because he's getting the ball, and with our tactic, like, we want him to be able to dribble, we want him to be able to beat a tackle, and we want him to be able to find and pass it to other players when they're open, and we want him to be able to score goals when he gets a chance, which is a lot of things we want him to be able to do. But if we could find a player that could do all of those things, then he would be awesome in this role. And we would want everybody always giving him the ball all the time. And we would want to lean on him heavily, basically. So, but again, it's the type of thing, if we ever do find that player, if we ever do get a chance to get that player, it is going to be from an auction, and it is going to be some totally crazy amount of money. And it is going to be the case if that player's ever injured or whatever, that basically the whole tactic don't work anymore. You're going to have to completely change everything because it's going to be so heavily reliant on him. So the other thing that we talked about was this striker. We did this offset to try and help him drift a bit more and find a bit more space and unlock a bit, to try and get a little bit more out of his positives, because if he was just in front, he did absolutely nothing except shoot. And at the end of the day, his finishing composure it's okay or whatever, but it's not great. If that's all we need, then we could get much higher than that. The reason why these are okay is because, we paid a premium for this speed and aerial ability. But if we're never utilising the speed or the aerial ability, and all he's doing is just sitting there waiting for someone to pass the ball for him to shoot, it's like the finishing and the composure just ain't that great. So I think if we have this masterful player here that we're talking about, then ideally what the striker would have is just ridiculously high finishing, composure, movement, and control, and then whatever else we could get on top of that. Ideally he would be fast, ideally he would be good in the air or whatever, but they're the requirements. And at the end of the day, at least with how the tactic is, if we shift this guy in front, it would work much better if this player, for example, had let's say if we swapped his finishing and speed, and we swapped his aerial ability and composure, and ideally, and swapped his crossing and control. If we could do those swaps, he would be a much better player for our tactic. Yet probably in the transfer market, he would be less desirable. Probably, I would have thought, in the game as a whole. Probably. So it's by theory, making him a worse player, it would make him a way better player for our tactic. But that isn't the player we've got, and we do have a player that has some serious strengths. So we have made a change to the tactic to get the most out of them, and that's okay because this guy isn't that great for the role either. But yeah, longer term, there's a real clear upgrade path here if we can get hold of there's a lot of scope for this tactic to just be way, way better if you have the actual right players for the roles. This keeper, his starting squad, we're totally happy, as it turns out, I believe, to just use this keeper next season, which is one of the reasons why we just want to sell the other one with those really high wages, and as soon as we get a bid, we'll just sell him. And we're happy to bide our time. Yeah, he's definitely worse than that other one, but it's just we're happy to roll with this guy and take our time to find. The starting squad players that you can use are kind of just awesome, especially if they're younger, just because, they have these 30k wages. It just really helps things. Just have a few of these. At the end of the day, you're not going to have too many of them, but even if you can just end up with 3 or 4 that you can keep around for a couple seasons, it's just a huge deal. This guy is a bit of a weird one because he's kind of clearly good. He's young, but his wages are a bit high. They're fine for what he is, but I think the main issue with this guy is just between these wages and this price that we paid, we got him early as well. We definitely wouldn't get this guy now because we know with our tactic and how everything's turned out that the speed and the aerial ability doesn't really matter that much compared to the finishing and composure. Our team can create the chances. We don't need these guys to we don't need our strikers to create the chances for themselves because of the way our tactic is set up. We create loads of chances for them. We just need them to be able to finish them. And with 47 finishing, he's just horrible for our tactic, basically. Having said that, though, at the level that we're competing at, as a striker that comes off the bench, he's kind of just awesome, just because he just has so much quality and so much speed and whatever, that all this stuff he can just really, when he's coming in against tired defenders at the level that we're at with this attributes, he can just really dominate. And even though his finishing is really low, his composure is actually really high, so that does help a bit there. And his long shots is decent, so it's not like he's a horrible goal scorer. Obviously, he's scoring a lot, so he's just doesn't have the ideal attributes we would want. We've got a lot of resources tied into a backup. Having said that, when your striker gets injured, you need another striker to play, and when that happens to us, it's not a huge step down. Arguably, actually, he's even better than the one we're starting with, quite frankly. I think you could open a debate. I think a lot of it is just how many of these shots are from inside the box versus outside the box. At the moment, they're more inside, and that's why it's this way around. But yeah, I think, you know, the other guy arguably is better. He's much more well-rounded. He's faster. You know, arguably is better. We probably should be playing a bunch of friendlies with the other guy and just testing that, to be honest. Especially now that we have him drifting wide, because this guy's better at drifting wide as well, because he's faster and because, you know, he can still cross or whatever. So he's worse in the air, but we don't. Especially once they're drifting wide to cross it, all of a sudden this guy's better in the air a bit, but that matters way less as well when he's drifting wide. So we should try that. Another thing that we wouldn't have realised without doing this video now. So yeah, on the whole, not in a rush to sell him, but we did pay quite a bit. We're certainly not in a rush to sell him for 75% of value. I think if we get a bid at some point, there will be a decision depending on our financial situation at the time and depending on whatever's in the scouting pool and needs and stuff. So definitely as and when the bid ever comes for this guy, there will be a decision for us. But I don't think we're going to sell him without that bid unless we're desperate, i.e. we have no money and there's just a player in our scouting pool that we just absolutely have to buy, and we have to get the money from somewhere. And at the end of the day, when it's millions, there isn't many players that can be sold to generate as much as this guy could generate. So I could see that possibly happening. This guy, we did already get a bid, more than we paid, a bit more. Obviously, if you factor in all the wages and the signing fee and blah, 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 I think we worked out that it's like we basically get our money back-ish, something like that. Again, for our needs, is just the finishing and composure. Like for our senior team, we want that to be super high. Obviously, this guy's young. He'd never be the starting striker at the moment for the senior team. He'd never be the second choice. So he's definitely here as a third choice striker. And hopefully he would develop up a bit or whatever. The other reason why he's here is just to guarantee that our youth team can compete. Because I think as long as you have a decent team and with a goodish striker, you've always got a chance to compete. But like if you don't have a striker that's goodish, you're just going to really struggle to score goals. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't really struggle. He's not world class at youth level, but he's going to be good enough that if your team is good enough, he will score some goals, and if the rest of your setup is fine, he'll get you there. So that's kind of the overall intention with this guy. We did have a chance to sell him, we didn't. So I think we're almost rolling with that. Like he will, the first 2 seasons in the league, he probably will be here, unless we happen to get another youth striker for a good price that, you know, is basically a similar age, or the same age or younger, and just better. Otherwise, he's probably just hanging around. Again, with a caveat, or if we're desperate for cash because of a player pops up. But in regards to this guy, you know, I think he can't take the long shots. It's definitely a reason when he comes on, you just don't want him in a role where that might happen. He's not materially bad at drifting wide. He's slower to get there or whatever, but the crossing is okay. He's quite well-rounded, I would say, on the whole. Movement not great, so that's not good with Poacher. The aerial ability is okay. He's kind of quite well-rounded, to be honest. Just, I think the most significant thing that's low to be aware of for the Poacher role is 2 things. It's the control and the movement, which is when you consider that pretty much only 4 things really matter, and 2 of them are basically the only things that really matter. Sorry, the finishing, the composure, the movement, and the control. Like they're the core ones for the Poacher. At least if like it's different if you're sort of threading through balls and hitting it long and stuff for him to run onto. Then a lot of other stuff matters. But if you're just talking about a team that's building up play slowly, passing it around or whatever, and the Poacher's not involved in the build-up, he's just standing there waiting for the team to pass it around and eventually give it to him in the box, like that's what really matters. So, yeah, nothing significant here. He is kind of the player that I've been using him as and imagining him to be. Although when I use him on the senior team, I am setting him to Poacher a lot, and I'm realising, like I said, 2 of the 4 attributes that matter are kind of really low. And yet so he can do some other things, like cross the ball a bit, or at least better than those things. So maybe he doesn't always have to be the Poacher when he gets subbed on. I think that's maybe the lesson to be learned there. We've got a bit more flexibility than that. He's not as good at the Poacher as I thought, and he's not as bad as other roles maybe he could play as I thought. This guy's starting squad. We're using him as box-to-box whenever he comes on. And I think looking at him, that's kind of fair enough. Like, work rate is pretty low for that. Bear that in mind. And he's not that fast, so he's not getting up and back probably that well generally. He's not great at tackling. The long shot's not great, but it's okay. Finishing not great, but well, yeah, it's not great, but it's also could be worse. And the controller's pretty good. The passing is alright. Vision, so he's just it's alright. I think definitely we would not be looking to start this guy, but as what is currently like third or fourth choice, depending on factors for our 2 central midfield spots. He's either the third or the fourth, depending on what role. And longer term, he probably ends up more like the 5th. Say longer term, like next season, and then after that, obviously, he's probably not involved. He is older, so we're not really developing up towards anything. We're just really looking at him through the lens of, when we have the replacement for him, we'll sell him, and even we may sell him before then if we get a transfer bid, because it is potentially, if it comes in at, like, let's say 200k, we are talking about 50k difference. That might be enough to just cash in early. Potentially, maybe not, because we are using him quite a lot, to be honest. So we may not for him just because of how much we're using him. Alright, sorry, let's keep going. This is a right back that we bought for our youth team because they had no fullbacks. I'm losing my voice. I'm going to have to quickly get a drink, sorry. Okay, sorry I'm back. I got the drink. I'm going to work out how to pause these if it's possible. So in the future, that won't be an issue. Have a little gap like that. Right. So we do have to bear in mind, we bought this guy when we added the fullback. We have been using him in the youth team. It is an interesting point, I think, because ideally the youth team would be ending up working towards having the same tactic as a senior team. Like, if you're playing properly, that's what you should be doing. But for the purpose, I have noticed we're not there yet, and we're having to play different tactics with our youth team depending on whatever players we've got. And I guess it is kind of a little bit interesting if you're reading the content that the youth team is playing a different tactic. One, playing a different tactic to the senior team, and two, the tactic that it is playing is evolving to just completely different tactics over time depending on whatever players we've got. And in the youth team in particular, like, that's kind of potentially always just going to be true because, well, eventually whatever players you have, which are typically you're basing your tactic around the best players in your youth team, and the best players are typically the oldest ones, and the oldest ones eventually turn 22 and will no longer be in the youth team. So the only real way that you can maintain the same tactic over time with your youth team is to just be playing like basically the same tactic as your senior team and doing all recruitment, filling all the roles, and having like, so this, just having a completely constructed and well balanced squad. And you can do that totally, but it takes time to do that, to build all that up. And like, realistically, there's only so many months this video series will last, pretty much. So, we're not really going to get there. So it is a bit of a weird one, really, with the youth, I guess, is what I'm saying. And now I'm not quite sure the right way to play it, so it's quite hard to assess these players like this. However, let's just assess the player as the player, let's say. So I think it was just a mistake to buy this player. Now, we did just desperately need in order to be able to compete for the youth team matches at the time, to set up any kind of team for the content, because we wanted to sort of make a tactic that made some kind of sense to just play those youth matches and check the stats. And we basically we didn't really have fullbacks, and the tactic we're playing just needed them. I think we did have a right fullback, but he had like 6 speed or something, or 10 speed, I don't know. It was super slow, not that great. And we had no left back. And in the scouting pool, there was just this guy, semi-decent right back, and another guy as a semi-decent left back. So we just bought him. And also at the time, we weren't even sure what tactic we were playing for the senior team. So we thought, we tried tactics with fullbacks, by the way, for the senior. So it allowed us to just try some things, basically. You can see here he's played some friendlies. And we ended up not using them. So it did allow us to tinker and try with tactics and stuff. So just through the lens of, factoring all that in, there was an urgency to have to get some players at the time to play the matches. It was their very first scouting pool. We started the last day of the month, so we literally had our starting squad and one scouting pool to do whatever, to play all of our first set of training league matches and all of our first set of youth training league matches. So we bought this player through that lens, so it's very hard to assess that. But through if he was in a scouting pool now, for example, we'd never buy him for that much. So basically this player just isn't that good. He's hardly got any attributes, no attributes materially over 60, got a couple around. Like realistically, this guy here could be better, or at least not much worse than this player. And this guy is in our scouting pool 15. So it's just a mistake. That's obvious. He's not that good. But again, that's just through the lens of now having many scouting pools and whatever. Like at the time, he was the best option available, and we, wanted to play all the matches to create the content and do whatever. So it's a tricky one, to be honest. As to the plan forwards from now, it's clearly it's just to get rid of this player. I think the question is now, when? Are we waiting for a transfer bid? Now, if we are, you don't receive them for players that are 18 or younger. So we're going to have to wait till he's 19 to even have a chance to receive one. So, we are proceeding on the basis that this guy is going to be, around for some time. So you're basically saying that we will pay him like another minimum. Technically we could get a bid for him the first day next month, but that's very unlikely. We may be waiting a whole season, half a season, who knows. So you're basically assuming realistically we're going to be paying like at least 100 and something thousand pounds wages, probably, is a likely outcome, to be able to sell him for whatever it is. And you're getting some decent options with him, so it should end up being more than 470. I don't know how much more, but more. Let's just say it's 500 or maybe 600. If it's 600, then you are talking about the difference between being able to sell him for 600 versus 353 by paying 100k wages. So that definitely makes sense. It's 250 more. If it's 500, then it's 150 more. If it's the same price, it's still a little bit more. After you get, you wait, you pay 100k wages and wait to sell him for 470 instead of 453. So you're making 17k more. But I'm pretty sure he'll be worth at least a little bit more. I could be wrong about that. But I think I'm right though, because as well he's got 71 ceiling here, so I think it's probably reasonable to expect that it isn't just this option and the previous one that went up a bit. It might be all of them. We'll also find out another one tomorrow, so we can get a better idea whether this is the next one is good as well. But I think on the whole he will be worth more, not millions, but could easily end up being, if it's in say 3 real life weeks from now, or 3 or 4 real life weeks from now, If it's 4 real life weeks from now, we'll pay like 150, 120 extra K wages. And if it is, it could end up being 600K. So we're definitely better off financially by waiting to sell him through the lens of just this player. But if we need the cash at any point between now and then, and we end up selling him in like 2 weeks' time, we might as well have sold him now, because then we would have saved 60K wages, basically. So it's an interesting one. But again, it's like even through that lens, if we sell him, we kind of don't have other players for our youth squad anyway. So we're back to the same problem. We'd have to get some other player. So we need to think about that. I don't think we can answer that one, to be honest, until we decide with our youth squad whether we're going to try to work towards building the same tactic or intentionally going to play a different tactic. And then if so, then we need to decide what that different tactic is and try and work towards that. So with that guy in particular, I think we can just say it's a difficult answer, but with all the hindsight, it's kind of like, we should be looking to sell this guy. I think it's just, are we waiting to get the bid or not? It feels like we are, to sum all of that up. I feel like the left back is going to be basically the same conversation. He's 1 year older. He's only got one attribute materially higher than 60, which is flair, which kind of doesn't really matter. His boosts are okay. His ceiling isn't as high as the other one, but it's alright. We paid a bit less. The wages are more. I'd say on the whole, there's more urgency to clear this guy than the other guy. Having said that, we bought this guy 10 days ago, and I think you won't get a bid until you've had a player for maybe 7 days, I think. So we've had him enough to be able to get a bid, plus he's over 18, he's 19 or older, so we can get a bid for this guy any day, so that's a factor. I honestly think at this point, we're probably just waiting to get a bid, and then we just sell him. I think that's what's happening, and then we'll just have to deal with the youth team however we can to fill the void in the meantime, and just work on that. So I think that's that with this guy. Just a mistake all in all, just not a very good player. But again, it was just the best out of what we had at the time. This was day one we started playing, so which seems like we started playing 10 days ago, I guess. Right, I think they're the only two players, though, that this is the case for. So, right, this guy was in our starting squad. His attributes are just falling off a cliff. And he's our fourth choice centre-half. I think ideally, basically, he will retire at the end of next season. We might just... It is only 30k, and we're basically selling him for nothing, effectively. It doesn't make any sense just to sell him for the sake of selling him. We were still using him all the time. He's just hanging around until we basically get certainly at least one more central defender, but probably two more, quite frankly. Because I think ideally what happens is he's at the moment the bench central defender. So I think ideally we get another starting one. This guy goes to the bench. And then this guy becomes the fourth choice. And then eventually we buy another one to make this guy the fifth choice. This fourth choice, fifth choice. So when we buy another centre half, this guy will go to the bench. He'll be the fourth choice, and this guy will be the fifth choice, or the first player to come in to the bench, basically after injury. And then later on, we'd buy another one, and this guy would basically be the one that, this guy will be the fifth choice. So we'll buy two more. Those two extra ones, one of them will start, one of them will be on the bench, or maybe Octai will be on the bench, and we'll buy two that start. And this guy will end up as the guy that comes onto the bench to cover for injury. And even at that stage, it still may make sense for this guy to be the sixth choice, because as we've already discovered, we've had all three of our starting centre halves out at the same time anyway. So there are, even as the sixth choice when you're starting with three centre halves, it's still totally possible that I'll end up naturally just playing at least a handful of substitute appearances over the season for sure. So got to bear that in mind. So yeah, this one in particular, he's just fine. We know his limitations. We work around him. His attributes are falling off a cliff. But at the end of the day, he's basically earning no wages, and we can't really sell him for anything. So he's just hanging around until we've got other players in place, because relatively to basically all these other examples we're talking about, this money is nothing compared to all of these other examples. All these other things matter. This is just an insignificant amount that just by trying to cash him out to save that tiny bit of cash, it could create a real problem for us if we happen to get a couple injuries. This guy, he's not worth anything. He's got wages. It's a weird one because at the moment he is our backup DMC. So as long as that's true, and guess he's here. At the end of the day, as bad as he is, if he just comes in and does the destroyer role as a backup, he can tackle or he's alright. He contributes a bit on set pieces. It's almost like, well, what more do you want? I'd a lot more, but at 30k wages, it's just a similar thing to the other player. Basically, he's just hanging around until we've got the depth, because it's just so little maintenance to keep him, and it's so little cash we're going to get to ever sell him. It's just insignificant versus just the fact that having him around just makes it so if we have some injuries, it's not a total disaster. This guy we recently bought. I think we've done a whole video on him, so don't really want to spend too much time on this guy, but I'll just say on the whole that he makes sense. We'll keep him. We've closely assessed him recently with strengths and weaknesses, so in particular we want him for the up and back midfield role, wing wide role, so he will, the tackling will be very useful, and he won't be ideally, breaking through on goal or anything very often, so this really low finishing and stuff won't really matter that much. On the same note, we're not fully utilising all of that speed whatsoever, and he contributes on the set pieces or whatever. Also, the speed is going down, and presumably will continue to do so. So the fact that we, obviously it's good that he's fast or whatever, but the fact that was definitely a key factor, but it wasn't like the only factor in buying him. It was this combination of passing and tackling combined with all this other good stuff that did it. So, so fine with this guy. Feel like he'll be a pretty important starting player. We're happy to pay those wages, and the fee was alright on the whole. So there isn't a lot of scope for attribute growth. This is a thing, so it's not probably the case that we hopefully can develop him up a bit and get him worth a bit more. But it's not like if this was if he was a couple I don't know, not even the same age or maybe 1 year younger, and this ceiling was 70. Then potentially we could develop this guy a lot, and potentially we could have sold him for millions. But I just don't think we're going to get we might be able to make something, but it's, I don't think we're going to end up selling him for 5 million or anything like that. Not even, not even remotely close. So we'll only be able to develop him up a bit. I think realistically, the hope, the dream, something like that would be to, kind of have him this season and 2 more. If we get promoted all those 2 seasons or whatever, probably by the time we're in the that following season after the 2 promotions, so this season, then 2 more where we get promoted, that's when this guy's contract will be running out. And then the season after, which is going to be, let's just work this out. So next season we're going to be in Division 4, we get promoted. Division 3, we get promoted. Division 2. So that's when we will no longer have the guy in Division 2. He probably will be fine there. It's Division 1 where he's not quite good enough. We may extend his contract for 1 season or whatever. But the overall point here, I think, is the dream, so to speak, is something like if we could get his value up enough by the time we sell him, that it would cover the wages, or a good chunk of the wages. Because obviously after this season and 2 more, and maybe even 1 more after that, you are talking that'll be well, if it is 1 more after that, it's going to be 3 after this one. The wages will go up if his attributes go up. It could be close to 2 million wages between 3 more seasons after this one and the rest of this one. Getting, it'd be towards 2 million wages, probably less. So if we could get his value up to, well, in this example, I guess that's going to be something like 2.5 million. If we did that, then we wouldn't lose too much. You know what I mean? So I don't know if we will, mind you. It's not a given at all. But even if we get up to 1.5 or whatever. But like I said, the dream is to try to recover our money. There's no profit to be made here, I don't think, just between this signing fee, these wages per season, and the growth that's kind of can exist. If we make a profit, it will not be much. So it's not about profit with this guy. I think it's just about a very useful team, very useful player for where we're at and where we will be next season after, maybe the season after that, and maybe doesn't end up losing us much to have him traverse this journey with us, basically. Right. This guy, mistake. It was officially a mistake, this one. This one, we've said it a few times, that we accidentally bought the wrong player. I think this guy, again, was in our first day scouting pool. There was another Italian AMC that had similar, but nonetheless quite different attributes, but he was another Italian AMC, and I think he was 24, so he was also 1 year younger, and it was like also £1 million, and also I think he had 300k wages, so it was like just slightly lower wages, 1 year younger, and had better attributes for what we wanted. So it's a weird one to assess, like, but let's just assume it wasn't a mistake. So basically he's just not good enough. I think the reason is just, again, for the role that we want, a lot of the same reasons why the other guy, the creative forward in AMC, it's a lot of the same reasons for the other guy, but this guy's even worse. So one, he doesn't have enough speed to generally get a good step on players. The strength is higher, but the dribbling is lower. On the whole, he's worse, and the flair is alright or whatever, but on the whole, he's not as good as basically dribbling to create anything, just because he's slower and the dribbling is low. And then in regards to passing, it's alright or whatever, but it's not towards 80 passing and vision. It's not that much. So it's just alright. Again, for the role we want, awesome. And then the goal scoring between the finishing, the composure is just bad. And the long shots, it's just not good either. So basically, he's no good at scoring goals. He's not particularly good at creating them. He's alright, but he's not particularly good at passing, whatever. And he's not particularly good at creating anything off the dribble. He's just not, and he's not good in the air to contribute on set pieces. It's just not good at all. Unfortunately, like, for the level that we're currently at in the training league, sure, he's fine. He's like great, but for trying to build something to move forwards and for season and season after, unfortunately, he just at this point, we're just hoping every day we get a transfer bid and we'll just sell him straight away. And probably he's just about the first one to go if we desperately need the cash at any point. That's the reality of the situation with this guy. So just not good enough for anything, and it wouldn't make sense to add a position to him for some other role, because he's just not that good at anything else that we need either. On the whole, he's just not good enough for anything in our tactic. Having said that, like, if he was a starting squad player, like, he'd be a dream to keep, sort of thing, to have a player like this on 30k wages, but but he ain't. So moving on, this keeper was in our starting squad. The 65 shot stopping is fine. Other than that, he's kind of just completely bad. Has high durability, which is the one thing that we basically don't care about. So he's just horrible, but as a third choice is better than any other keepers in our squad. And same sort of deal, like the wages are really low, so the maintenance is really low. I think there is a difference with this guy, that he's about, unlike the other guys that have no value, he has a little bit of value. So they're not enough to, I think it's just a case if we get a bid, maybe we sell him. Maybe. Even then, I'm not sure, because it's just, there's a little bit here. There's like a decision to be made, but it's so small that at the end of the day, he's just hanging around for us to get another keeper. I think in particular, this guy is just worse. This is the problem. That guy's bad. This guy's like even worse. So, it is just a case of like, he's just third choice keeper. That's what it comes down to. So, if we get a bid, maybe we sell him. But yeah, he's just bad. But we didn't acquire this player. So, I think the like original assessment of this guy is exactly the same, and I think it's unchanged. At the end of the day, the thing we do care about the most is his shot stopping, and that is the one thing that he has, other than the durability, that's actually alright. So, say it's the one thing we care about. I don't know if I said that, but if I meant the thing that we care about the most. Right, now we're getting into some DCs. Now, these guys still have been playing a bit because of various injuries and whatever, and we do run 3 DCs, so we are expecting some unavailability. I think this guy is the best of the rest, which I think is at the moment down to two other DCs. No, 3. No, this guy's the best of the rest. Alright, so this guy is the second best of the rest. Slow, not particularly good at tackling. Can mark, which is oddly... And has good positioning, which is actually two of the two strengths compared to other centre-halves. I think he got a 10 out of 10 in the most recent match he played. Yeah, 2 10 out of 10s in... Well, let's not bother with the friendly. So the official matches... he got a 10 out of 10. In this one he got a 6, but he only played 9 minutes. It's not... We can kind of cater for that a bit, because we do have 3, so we can try and stick him to where he doesn't sort of tackle or whatever, and he's just covering and marking in the box, and we're sort of getting the most out of his positioning and marking. So it's not all bad. And again, the wages are low, and the value is low, so we're not really like gaining anything by selling him. Even if we get the bid, doesn't really matter for the sakes of 10k. If we do, I guess we have a bit of a decision to be made, but like on the whole, I think it's just a case of he's just hanging around until we get the replacements. That's all it is when we get other players. This guy, just a similar type of thing, except the marking is worse, the positioning is worse, the speed is worse, the tackling is similar. So he's just worse. He's the worst of all of them. He's hardly played, but he has played. This is the thing. He's hardly played, but he has played. So we have needed him. And again, that's just basically where it's at. He's just around until we get replacements. So at the moment, we've had 3 DCs out. So when that's happened, we've basically now got 4 others, right? So 3 of those will start, and 1 of them will be on the bench. Do we need that much depth? Maybe not. Maybe we could sell 1. So that's just worth bearing in mind. But again, we have used him, so... right. Let's just check this other DC whilst we're on DCs. And again, this guy... He's 22, he's younger. He's played quite a bit. He's alright at tackling. He's a bit far... Like, he's one of those ones, and the marking and positioning is good again. You can get a lot out of that, and he's not as slow as the other guys. He's alright in the air. Like, he's not horrible at these things. And the tackling is okay, some parts. So, like, he's better than these other guys. But he may end up being the one that gets sold first, by the way. Just if we happen to get a transfer bid for him, we probably do cash out. Because it's the one that has a bit of value. So, yeah. So that's a possibility. Because I just don't see this guy being around longer term. Yeah, he's young and we could develop him a bit. But, I mean, you know, his ceiling is 59. It's not really high. It's okay. There's a bit of growth, but... Yeah, he's just nowhere near where he needs to be. So, like I said, if we get a bid, he may be the first one that goes. At the end of the day, he's basically just hanging around, again, like these other guys, until we get replacements. So, but yeah, I think like he is a better one, though. He's not as bad as these guys. But like I said, he may go if we get the bid. If we don't, we definitely won't sell him first. We'll sell these other guys first. But yeah, there's no intention to keep any of these guys long term. So yeah, it's just about squad depth for the moment. This guy, he was starting a lot. We were trying to get a lot out of this 69 long shots. That's now going to be 73. You know, he's not too slow, but he's not good at all. But it's a similar type of thing. He's just providing that squad depth. I think the role that we're playing him in, which is like a central midfielder, that we're really just trying to get leverage the long shots. I think that's the correct assessment still, because he can't really do anything else. He's basically just, everything else is really bad, and I guess the passing and vision is just like borderline acceptable, and the speed is okay. But other than that, he's just like, he's just bad. So if you're not leveraging that 69 long shots, which will be 73, like you don't want to even play him at all. And that's why I was saying before. And again now, and he's 20 though, so he has got quite a bit of scope for growth. If we get a bid for him at some point, we may sell him. But the fact that this guy could also play for our youth team next season, that's an extra reason to keep him. So no real hurry to get rid of this guy, but he also has no real long-term future in the squad. And I think the assessment of if we're not leveraging this long shots, we don't want to use him, is correct. So basically, if we need a backup where we can leverage the long shots, then he's coming in, and if we can't, then this guy is coming in. So we are using both of these central midfielders quite a bit, depending on who is out, depends who comes in, and other various things. So this guy, we just don't really have. We're not using him in the youth team at the moment. We don't really have any real youth squad depth. Whatever tactic we're playing here, we can't play next season because we're going to lose this striker. We're going to lose this striker. So we're going to lose whatever. It's possible, basically, that this guy will end up needing to start next season just because he will be 21. So however bad he is, he's probably going to be better than 16-year-olds. So we may end up, having said that, looking at him, that's not necessarily true. So yeah, at the moment it's just about depth, but probably this guy is just going to be so easy to get an upgrade no matter what we want to do with him that we can get a bid for him. I think if we get a bid for him, we probably just sell him. It's going to make a success and we sell. Arguably, we should just sell him anyway because we're paying 1k a day wages, so yeah, I think the question is, if we do get a bid, is it likely to be more than his current value? And I think there's a good chance that it is because of boosts like this. Might be a bit more, so it may end up, yeah. So anyway, we're probably waiting to just get a bid to sell that guy. There's no future for him. He's just not good enough or whatever. And I think whatever original assessment we had when we used him was just he's horrible at everything. All we want him to do is to try to tackle and to try to cross it, basically, and maybe have a long shot, which is what we tried to do with him. And I think that was an original. So we tried him as like an inverted inside forward to cut in to have a shot. We tried him to like track back to tackle. We tried him to just put crosses in or whatever. So, I think we had the correct assessment with this guy. He's just really bad with a few things that are not completely horrible to try to get out of. But yeah, no real future anywhere here for this guy. But again, it's just about numbers, pretty much. It's for this guy in particular, for the youth team, not for the senior team. We don't need him for the senior team. This guy, he's the third choice AMC. If he does play, he is not playing the creative forward role. He's just playing a regular attacking midfielder role, maybe support striker. Looking at him, his finishing is all right, pretty good. Composure horrible, which is a reason to not put him in support striker because he might get closer. Long shots is okay, but the passing is bad. The vision is great, and a lot of all these physicals are kind of like, yeah, whatever. They're okay, not that bad. So I think on the whole, like, he's just got no future. Again, we just really don't want to be using this guy. If we do, you kind of just want him to be an attacking midfielder role to not encourage anybody to give him the ball too much. He has played, again, this is worth noting. I think, however, though, we're probably at the stage where we have enough squad depth now that if we get to the point where our AMCs are injured and we need to use this guy, then we're probably just not using an AMC. Let me just check the match log. Interestingly, he played... let's ignore the friendlies because we're typically just randomly trying a lot of stuff in them. So, training league match on the 13th. Yeah, so that was a week ago. He hasn't even played in friendly in 5 days. He's just completely out of everything. Because I think, like, what I'm saying is the case. Like, even if both even this guy we were avoiding playing too much, like, at all, to be honest. He's not even on the bench typically. This guy, if we end up, 2 AMCs down, he just ain't playing anyway. So I think with this guy, the question is, do we just get rid of him now? Or do we wait for the bid? So, what is it, like 30k difference? He might be worth more. If he is, it's not going to be much. But at 30k, like, we probably do get a bid before waiting 30 days. So in a vacuum, it just makes sense to wait until in the vacuum, I'm basically saying, like, in this decision isolated all by itself, we just wait. Reasons why we may just sell him earlier is, again, because we just need the money and we do it, or because we need the squad spot. So, because we run here, not unregistered, we got squad numbers. So we got 1, 2, 3, we got 5 spots. Is it 6 spots? Yeah, so if we run out, which could easily happen at the beginning of the next season, by the way, after we get all of our graduates in, that might just be a time where he just gets sold if we don't get the bid before then. But for now, I think we're just going to wait and see if we randomly get a bid for him. It's the correct move, I think, to make, just from a finances perspective. But yeah, he's just no excuses. He's just gone. You know, unlike this other guy, for example, he can still play for the youth next season, so he potentially can still do something. But this guy is just, he ain't playing ever, no matter how many injuries. And also, he's old enough that he's only, like, his value isn't going to go up, and also he does have a bit of value. So he is probably unique in that regard. He's like the only player in our whole team in that boat. Like, completely unusable, like, completely will not be used no matter what for senior or youth. And he's around that age where he's not getting better, he's getting worse, and he has some actual value where, like, if, for example, he was only worth 10k, you just sell him now to not pay the wages anymore, but he isn't. He's worth enough that it's worth waiting. So, yeah, a bit unique. This guy, we were starting him a lot in right midfield until very recently. He still comes off the bench sometime. He's still involved. We did just buy another player that we're out of position, so he'll become less involved. He is about to lose 3 speed. He'll still be okay. He'll still be serviceable for a bit. And the fact that he has just featured so heavily, that he has done a good job, that we know his limitations and his strengths, like his passing, for example, is good. We play heavily into that when the tactics and stuff when he plays. I think we just keep him until we don't need him anymore. Or perhaps until, if the boosts are bad next season or whatever. But I think mostly it's just, he's just hanging around until he's superseded. I think the assessment is sort of fine for our tactic. You know, he's bad at certain things, but we just play into it. At least before, if he's playing MR, we were kind of offsetting this guy here to sort of encourage to pass the ball. And so that he only does what he can do and not what he can't do. And with that limitation, we're aware of that limitation. If he does play, we will, consider those tactical changes to go with it. So I think he's hanging around, basically. Because again, at these 30k wages, we can't really get any replacements. So yeah, and at the end of the day, we will get. As we get promoted, we will get more and more financial resources. So the problem, this problem will naturally go away. Needing to worry about these 30k wages, probably next season it will still matter for us, but then maybe one promotion later, if we get one after one promotion, it's probably not that big a deal anymore. But at that point, these contracts are all winding down anyway, and you're never going to use contract extensions on these players. So, yeah. Anyway. Alright, this MC is really slow, which is an issue for a lot of our MC roles now, are these box-to-box midfielders, and being this slow is like a major issue. He has played a bit for our senior team. He does come off the bench a bit for our youth team, so he's not starting for them. There is quite a gap between his current ability and his ceiling, so he can grow quite a bit with the boost, as you can see. His value isn't much. So even if his value does go up, it's not going to be by huge amounts or whatever. So I think the reason to keep this guy around is because, you're going to play him at some point, not for any other reasons. It doesn't make sense to keep him to wait for a bid just to get the extra money. If you're never going to use him, you just sell him. So I think there's a couple of things here. So one, we are using him in the senior team. In the case where we get an injury, or we've just got an extra central midfielder recently, so now he's further back in the pecking order. We got 2 starters, and then we got one on the bench, and then we got another one, and then there's basically him. So at this point, in order for him to get onto the bench, we need 2 injured central midfielders. But that's possible. That's totally possible. And one of the real issues with injured, unlike a lot of other positions, it's really hard for us to play anything that's conceptually remotely like this tactic, really, if we only have 1 central midfielder available in the team. So I think it's just a bit... so that's just a factor. Whereas, like, we can do something still quite similar, albeit maybe worse, without a defensive midfielder, and again, without an attacking midfielder. Like, potentially we can even do it without a left midfielder or right midfielder, but yeah, I mean, potentially we could try and do it without a central midfielder. I'm just saying it will probably impact equally as much as not having a wide midfielder, to be honest. Similar impact. So, that's just a factor. I think it's just a case of as and when we get another central midfielder, to be honest. He will just be sold, I think. Well, not... Yeah, I mean, this guy will be sold first, and then that guy later. Again, it's just because of these really low wages. There's no real urgency here. And then the second question is, he's not playing a new thing now, but will he just be playing next season? And, well, no. He will still be the bench, because these 2 guys will still start if we have them. We will see. Just the flexibility is just worth keeping. And, you know, at the end of the day, this guy, he is worth 182. If we get a bid for this guy, we may end up just selling him, and then the other guy will start. So, yeah. So he's not particularly good, but we're just going to keep him. This guy, yeah, we're just never using him. He can't play for the youth. We're never using him for the senior team under any circumstance. This whole entire time, he's played 1 match off the bench, and this was pretty much back when, you know, I don't know when that would have been. Really, right near the start. I think that's just day one of this whole exercise. Played 6 minutes off the bench, and that's it. He's just no involvement. Won't play for the youth team, so he definitely needs to be sold. So the question is, why are we waiting? We're paying... If we sell him, he might be worth slightly more. I can't quite remember the other boost, to be honest. He's not going to be worth much more. It's only going to be slight. Let's say it's optimistically 80k. I don't think it will be, but let's say that because it makes the math easy. So if it's 80k versus 49k, so we would get 31k more. And then we're paying 1k a day. So, and that's optimistically. More likely it's going to be 65k. So if it's 65k, we're getting 16k more. It's not even worth waiting, to be honest. Let's just sell him. It's what, within thousands, and yeah, in that case, in the case that it's 65k, it's like 16 days. It's blah blah blah. It's pretty close. Okay. I don't know. Thing is, we're waiting for bids for a lot on these players, and we will get them for some of them, but not all of them. This is the thing. So, and we will get 6 graduates. I think this guy will just pull the trigger and sell him, because we're going to get 6 graduates. They're going to take up 6 squad spots, and we're going to lose no players unless we sell them. And we may buy some other players. And yeah, so it kind of feels like we may end up needing to just sell this guy at the end of the month anyway, even if we don't have a bid, after having waited these days to get it anyway. So I think this guy in particular, we will just pull the trigger on. We should have already done it 10 days ago, probably. It's probably true. 9, 8, 7. We should have done it before now. If we had done this reassessment before now, we would have already sold him before now. He's now sold. Right, moving on. That's it. So, honestly, I think we could... I want to leave it at this. It's quite long. It's an hour and 20 minutes. I'm not going to do the whole youth squad. And having now realised the exercise that we just did, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of the same stuff. It's just... What I'll do is I'll assess only the players we bought. I won't assess all the ones in the starting squad, because it's just going to be a lot of the same stuff. Same themes that we just saw repeating over and over and over again. But even then, I think all the ones we bought are in the senior team, and they're all already assessed. Yeah, so there's nothing to see here. I think there's just all these players that, at the end of the day, there's like maybe a little exercise here. That we got a few too extra players. We will get 6 graduates, so we'll have 6 extra. We will lose 4 because they're too old. So we'll have 2 extra next season regardless. So arguably, we just don't need these players, and we're just waiting for nothing. We're just paying these wages, and they're just never going to play. I think there's probably a few players in this bucket, so let's just sell these now. This guy, right. So this guy at the moment is 21. I think. The thing is, you won't get injuries in the youth team, so as long as you've got the players, you're fine, basically. I think this guy is just 20. We're just never going to play this guy, but he's worth a little bit. But, again, 10, 11 days waiting. He's 19. You could get a bid. He is getting a fair bit better, and he will get added DMC. That could add quite a bit of value because his value will get, how do you say, because it factors in their attributes for their position and the transfer market and stuff. So this guy might have much better attributes for defensive midfielder. Might help his value a bit. This guy will wait to see if we get a bid at some point, and he's 19, so we could get one. So that guy will wait on just because he's getting that extra position, and that might help a bit. Plus the good boost. This guy's boost is horrible. He's 18. We're not going to get a bid. He's worth nothing. So we'll just sell this guy. And what was the last one? This guy, yeah, the super slow, no good. Yeah, all right. So we'll just sell. We're not going to get a bid for 2 seasons for him either. So let's just sell this guy. Right, we really cleaned up a lot, to be honest. There. Not going to make our finances look much better, but I don't know. What did we sell? 4 guys. So, yeah, we did. So we sold 4 guys. So actually, this is 120k wages. So it's not completely insignificant. Right, makes that projection look slightly not as bad. So yeah, so we're done. Initial squad assessment, and actually off the back of that, through the senior team, we'll rewatch the video ourselves. There was at least maybe 5 tactical points noted of players for things that we need to keep aware of for matches going forwards. We sold 4 players, and we're fully aware that there are, a couple players in this squad that are literally here for no reason other than just waiting for a bid. So actually, yeah, there was quite a bit here that we just sort of lost track of through. So taking stock, I think, was a good exercise in the end. And I suppose off the back of that, I would suggest maybe that this is just this type of exercise just makes sense to do with your own squad periodically. I'd say when you start playing, maybe every week for the first season. After that, I don't know, maybe every week to every 2 weeks. I don't know. Longer term, certainly I would recommend this at the beginning of every season, just to reassess everything from scratch, especially with all the training options. And players get better and worse and whatever over time. So just to properly reassess everything, make sure that the players that you think are the best players are the best ones, that they are good at what you think they are, that they are suited to the role or whatever. So I definitely would recommend this exercise at the beginning of every season for everybody. So thank you for watching, and we'll catch you for the next video.